so my TV's glow.
Okay, we are live now. 3/25/2024, full moon. I think we just had an eclipse leading up to the big one. That was Tears on the Big Screen. This is some AI generated, I guess you would say. This is some music created on a website called, and I'm going to share a link to it, suno.ai. And what you do is you prompt it and it presents you with some music. And Tears on the Screen was just my attempt to put something satirical out there about actors and how they're representing themselves on the news, etc. Things we can't say, but we can have music about them. And it's actually pretty decent. And of course, you've probably heard this if you're subscribed at the main YouTube channel. Here's another one. This is an epic rant, rather a rap. And here's the actual the prompt. I said here that I wanted, quote, an epic rap about Ryan who has a Mandela effect and thinks his name is Brian. And he's awaiting a big check from Ed McMahon. So that's the theme. And here's what it presented. So here we go. This is generated by suno.ai.
Yo, listen up, let me tell you about Ryan. Got a mind so twisted, thinking he's Brian. But it's all a Mandela effect, don't you see? He's looking for a big check from Ed McMahon. Ryan's out here living in a parallel universe, claiming his name is Brian, it's getting worse. But I gotta break it to him, he's got it all wrong. Ed McMahon ain't giving out checks, move along. Ryan, oh Ryan, you're lost in a dream, thinking you're Brian, chasing a scheme. But you gotta wake up, face reality. No big check from Ed McMahon, just let it be.
Now, having rendered a few of these, and I've spent about an hour and a half making a ton of things, jingles, making commercials, stuff to add into the 24/7 stream. It's very useful. But it occurred to me that people like The Weeknd or Taylor Swift may not even exist, which is actually kind of good news. But they are easily replaceable. You know, Prince, for example, could have thousands of songs released into eternity. You wouldn't know if someone died or not. Are they still recording music? Sounds like it. And it's only getting better. Here are a couple of tracks. I asked for gospel music that thanks God for the flat earth.
With every step we take, we feel the Maker's grace. The earth is flat, a masterpiece in space. Thank you, Jesus.
It even thanks Jesus. Again, this isn't real necessarily. Here's another one.
Shining like the stars. For the earth is flat and it is so divine. Praise be a testament to the...
It even mentions the firmament. Okay, one more. Les Go says music passes. Yeah, actually, it's incredible. This is a chemtrail rap, and I dare any of you not to like this.
Yo, listen up, I gotta tell a tale about the chemtrails in the sky, ringing the alarm bell. They poison in the air, messing with the brain waves. Got us feeling dizzy, got us caught in their maze. They spraying chemicals, trying to keep us all asleep. But I ain't falling for it, I'm wide awake. I'ma keep spreading the truth, making people aware. They try to control us, but I won't play fair. Chemical conspiracy.
All right, there you have it. That's called Chemical Conspiracy, and I didn't name the track. I just prompted it, and it's basically about a chemtrail truther who's not going to be deterred by the normies who don't believe him about the mind-altering chemicals in the air. And I've been using this for jingles, commercials. I have a lot of interesting tracks that you'll be hearing in the near future, and it's going to be very useful for some of our other productions. For example, documentaries, animations. In fact, I think I have another example. This one might be a little too intense for the live stream. I wanted some kind of a track to describe a battle between cyborg penguins cleaning up a deep underground military base that has been infested with genetically enhanced rats. And it's just a storyline I've had for some time. We have the storyboard, but I asked for a track and I specified I wanted it in some kind of like black metal industrial style. So here is this one. It's called Penguinotti. Yeah, probably not appropriate for right now, but interesting, the possibilities. It's just another thing that has made a lot of people replaceable. Just like last month, I was given a beta test on Amazon where you upload an ebook and it will present it as an audiobook for sale, full royalties to you, without having to share it with a human reader. Dewis and Paris says sounds soulless. Well, that's the thing. Is this incredible or is it sad that it's actually as good, if not better, than what we hear on the radio all the time? Armin Reese says artists will soon be AI. At that point, music will be made by humans, will be a luxury that people will pay for, like organic beef. Yeah, organic art, sure. But I want to point out, too, that the only people that I really see using this stuff, because I've been using it since Deep Story, I've been using this for a while, as far as for editing, and I have been incorporating a lot of this type of artwork into what we do here and other things, but, I found a lot of uses for it. But my point of it is, I don't see this being adopted or used by people who aren't ordinarily creating stuff. So this is just another tool for artists. Like Photoshop didn't get rid of photography, the airbrush didn't get rid of the paintbrush, which is what people thought back then. I don't see this changing anything. If I was a songwriter, I might use this to create something to use as a template, but again, I don't think it's going to replace anybody. AI won't replace anybody, but the people who use it will replace people who don't. It's a tool. Elephant Tusk says, my brother's super talented. He's obsessed with AI art and song creation. It's super sad to see. See, there's this weird Luddite tendency among conspiracy theorists and the right to be against technology, any new innovation. And I'm like, why? If you're using high-speed internet, then you might as well accept that you're going to accept the Neuralink. Probably not the implant at first, but you're going to have some wearable eventually. There's no sense in pretending like you're going to resist the flow of technology and everything that it's bringing. But a few other things to consider here. People who aren't really skilled at articulating their ideas, whether it's spoken or visual or even music, are now going to be incredibly enabled, which can only benefit. I mean, sure, it's going to generate a lot of noise, but I think it's also going to have an overall net effect that's positive. Let's continue here. Slowburn1 says, sad, don't have the real human touch musically, it is off. See, I would dispute this. I would argue, like the Turing test, is it a real person, isn't it? I would imagine that I could have a group of people listen to that Flat Earth gospel track who don't know if it's fake or not, and they'll think it's real. We talk about real or fake, and can you tell if it's real or fake, and how my contention is that they have intentionally blurred the lines by using crappy CGI instead of organic effects, which don't age as well as the organic effects. We've talked about this quite a lot. The guy that did special effects for 2001 Space Odyssey, Douglas Trumbull, special effects guru, said that his effects from 50 years ago age better because he used models and real props rather than everything created within a computer, which he said just doesn't age as well. My point being, they've done this on purpose to make us susceptible to the worldview fakery, the fake news, the fake everything. And I think similarly with music, we've seen more and more this trend towards removing the human touch, more polish, more auto-tune. I mean, deadly levels of auto-tune. Didn't Travis Scott kill like 9 people with auto-tune? Death by auto-tune. My point of it is just simply that people can't tell real from fake visually, and they're not going to be able to hear the difference either. People are going to be lost. Yeah, that's right. Tim Osman drove by a fake buffalo today. We saw an image of that because buffalo are fake. I want to clarify this. Yesterday I mentioned the meme. Someone had pointed out some meme and it had what I said, the Eddie Murphy meme. Now, just so you know, this Eddie Murphy meme generator guy is not Eddie Murphy. I know it's not Eddie Murphy, but if you search Eddie Murphy meme generator, you get this guy. So just to be clear, and I think it was who was it that told me? Somebody in the comments mentioned. It's like, yeah, I know, I heard. People think this guy's Eddie Murphy. He's not. People also have been sharing this picture of Johnny Depp, whose face has been swapped with Courtney Cox, and they're saying this is Johnny Depp. Like, don't people search their images anymore? Let's see what else we have. Donald Trump saying he's Christ. Nothing new there. New movie called Late Night with the Devil. Opening night, and this is just a coincidence. $666,666. Mere coincidence. Not a PR stunt. No way they could fake something like that, because man's not capable of faking stuff like that. It would require the demiurge, aliens, advanced computers that we can't see, or God. Isn't that the reasoning that a lot of truthers use? Now, we were getting into the Crocus Theater or Crocus concert, and one of the last things I mentioned, which I think bears repeating, is someone had done a search on the theater itself, and they found they could not find any examples of recent reviews, as in Yelp reviews or any kind of reviews since like 2017. And even looking at Google Maps and satellite imagery, they couldn't find any evidence that the parking lot was even in use in that time. So what does that mean? Psyopsicle says Diddy's the modern day OJ, the Bronco's the private jet. Yeah, we saw that. Diddy, we've heard this has been building for some time in the truther circles, Trutherville. The word is that Diddy is like the Epstein to the hip hop world. And there are all kinds of weird things. I mean, if you think it's weird, and when you see these celebrities hanging out with other celebrities and they make these strange inferences, but we shall see. I did see an image of his home, and it looked like his children were in handcuffs. Something about sex trafficking. The kind of stuff that Tim Ballard is into. And then he does movies about fighting it. Here's the image of one of the shooters from the event. One had his ear chopped off and fed to him. And then, of course, this guy had his eyeball popped out. During his arrest, Mohammed Sabur's eye fell out of its socket. And of course, there you have the eye just on top of his eye socket, like literally popped out. But his mouth is closed and his other eye is closed. I don't know what to make of it. I saw another picture. One of them was having his genitals electrocuted with some kind of a battery, like a car battery. It was pixelated, but it looked, I mean, it's fakeable. This is theater. Here's one more point about the theater where the thing took place. It was empty. They filled it up with a bunch of actors, just like the movie Tenet. It's just like every other psyop. It checks off every box. It's extraordinary. The timing of it, well, we predicted it. Yeah, 322. It's the Skull and Bones ritual. And there's more. We have uncovered quite a lot more to indicate that this thing was planned long in advance, drilled for. There were actual drills conducted there. And there was also some strange references to Vegas all over it, which ties into this theme of the concert shootings. The HBIC says there was no screaming or panic in the theater. Yeah. Now, this may or may not be something. There's a new Ghostbusters movie. Look, I tried to watch the one from 2016 so I could watch this one and have a sense of continuity, and I couldn't get more than 3 minutes in. I couldn't even follow the monologue. It wasn't even close to funny. I wasn't capable of watching that one. It was terrible. But the new one's called Frozen Empire, and someone has connected this to Godzilla and Kong, the new empire. So the theme here, Empire, New Empire, Frozen Empire. Not quite sure, but Game of Thrones, winter is coming. For some time, we've kind of correlated this with the nuclear winter. And so Frozen Empire may be an allusion to that. As far as Godzilla, well, Godzilla is a metaphor for the atomic bomb. Came out the year of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We recently had the Godzilla movie, which passed Oppenheimer. So there's that. Godzilla, by the way, was stored at sub-level 33 in one of the previous movies, and of course that's somewhat related to the new Fallout series on Amazon, which takes place in Vault 33. All right, let's move on here. Ted Stricker 2112 says that eye pick is really convincing. Yeah, that looked like some kind of Halloween prop. None of it's convincing to me because this is it's an investigation. It's a mass murder, and yet every aspect of it is being televised. We see the guys being arrested. We see them being tortured. I called it out. It's going to be an episode of Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo Justice. Something bad happens. It gets solved, and at the end they unmask the bad guy, and we all found out at the same time who it was and why. In one episode, you get the whole story. Truthers are the most visually illiterate people out there. It's a very common thing. So Furious George said this is not AI. This really happened. Trump allowed the bastard Lavrov to sit in the Oval Office at the president's desk. If you are pro-Ukraine, this should make you nauseous. So this individual is saying this is not AI. You can trust me. This should make you nauseous. Well, the added context is this is a digitally altered photograph. The heads have been swapped. So many liars on both sides. That's why I'm suggesting that we just got to nuke Trutherville altogether. There's nothing there worth salvaging. People who are still there are just behind the times, on the wrong side of everything at this point. A couple more strange little turns here, then we'll get back onto the important subjects. QAnoners are fawning over Barron Trump, Chairman Wilding here, and these people have huge accounts. They're more popular than I could ever be on Twitter. They have like 50,000 subs, 5 million subs, because they spend all day fawning over JFK Jr. and young pictures of Donald Trump. These people are in a cult. Well, now their obsession, and this is very unhealthy, it's on Barron Trump because he's 18 now or something. So they're always focusing on how he's an angel, like literally a Nephilim, because of his height. And they're suggesting that maybe Trump was supposed to lose, and this was always the plan because it was always about Barron Trump, time-traveling Barron Trump. Well, this is a Twitter account called John's Army. And by the way, I had that website generate a rock song about JFK Jr. coming down with aliens to save the world. I'm going to release an album, don't you worry if you've missed that. But anyway, they're focusing on this individual saying, it's funny. As he matures, Barron looks like a perfect combination between President Trump and Princess Diana. So they're imagining in their weird fan fiction religion that Donald Trump had sex with Princess Diana and that Barron Trump is the product. They're fantasizing about this, which is kind of sick considering that Princess Diana publicly admitted to having, well, it was publicly known she was having a relationship with JFK Jr. So JFK Jr. and Trump both got with Princess Di, and Trump got her pregnant. And JFK Jr., by the way, was also sleeping with Ghislaine Maxwell. Well, in response to this nonner, this Kool-Aid drinker, had said it's time to pray, and they have the praying emoji. So they're praying. And JFK fan 325 says it's time to pray. Now, this guy has been saying since last November that JFK is going to come back tomorrow. It's always going to be tomorrow. It's the calendar that's wrong, not him. But here's what he said. Let's pray that they crash the economy near Christmas or Easter. It has to be biblical. It is now time to pray because we're right here on the verge. So they're praying that next week the economy collapses. It's the most bizarre doomsday cult in the world. Just leave it at that for now. Mango Penguin says, I'm going to let Tim put me to sleep. My subconscious will listen. Yeah, that's how the public actually operates. They have what I call mind aids, where they don't consciously filter the information coming in. Now, you can trust me. I will not infect you with any bad mind viruses. Anything that I put into your mind will only help you. These will just be auto-hoaxology axioms, like fake until proven real. You don't have to believe. Non-believing isn't denialism. So in other words, you'll wake up probably feeling a little more relaxed and edified. Seattle could get the nuke and you wouldn't lose a minute of sleep over it. I won't. Well, I will because I'll be covering it, but I will be unperturbed. But speaking of mind aids, because I started using this term to describe the general public, not just the fact that they're not using critical thinking when it comes to whatever's being pumped out of the media, but that they're conditioned to be this way, to make them vulnerable to mind viruses sent down from government sources. They just don't want non-state approved mind viruses running amok because it'll get their sheeple infected. If you're already understanding the level of fakery that goes into our worldview construction, then you can consider yourself inoculated. But came across this article, The Man Who Thought AIDS Was All in the Mind. This is from a few years ago. This guy Schmidt believed that it was a psychosomatic disease caused by an outbreak of mass hysteria, and they were thinking themselves ill. It was kind of controversial. It's just a throwback story from a few decades ago. But it really got me thinking about psychosomatics and how the people who are spreading fear, if it's baseless, if it's mere superstition, if it's there to keep people in a state of compliance because they're terrified, whatever it happens to be, then you would label them terrorists, right? You are spreading terror. That's what you do. And I think the more that we examine this objectively, we can say quite confidently that the Trutherville community, the Red Pillars, are also terrorists in a sense because they are just helping to spread what would be hypochondria and possible psychosomatic illnesses. I would even say that anybody who died from the suddenly died, the list of people, it could have just been psychosomatic. And we could blame the truthers for having. Imagine that. Imagine the irony. If I'm right and there is nothing to fear, but they've ginned up so much fear that the truthers are actually responsible for real death by way of spreading a psychosomatic hypostition. It's all in the mind. It's a message I got from Pac-Man Has Lockjaw. Okay, so I saw this ridiculous video on some YouTube channel dedicated to physics. 1 minute they're talking about physics, and they're talking about CERN. And the next moment, they're talking about the Mandela effect. And I'm like, look, you can't do this anymore. You cannot talk about the Mandela effect and CERN in the same breath. And that was linked from something Joe Rogan was talking about. So Joe Rogan was talking about something about CERN, and it got this conversation going. But I just want to point out that the Mandela effect has nothing to do with physics or CERN. If you want to understand the Mandela effect, and for some reason the mass media doesn't want to, they like to play dumb about it, you would put it in the category of DSM. It's a psychosomatic, or no, I'm sorry, it's a psychological, I wouldn't say disorder, but you could call it a delusion, a persistent delusion. And it's generally rude to look at someone's religion and its myths and to call it a delusion, especially the true believers, but it might be accurate in some instances. And with the Mandela effect, it's specifically a delusion because it's not really attached to anything transcendent, but it's attached to the dynamic between the person presenting it with their binary, the retroactive interference that they present as an interrogator, and a tainted witness themselves as believers. They are considered to be a tainted witness. So they're asking the question, they're creating the effect. The Mandela effect is a delusion centered around prompted imaginings that are mistaken for memories. They are creating false memories. The Mandela effect community are gaslit to an extreme degree. Very delusional. So my point is, Pac-Man Has Lockjaw said, the fruit of the loom logo had a cornucopia. No one can tell me otherwise. So he's certain of it, and he's not going to accept anybody trying to explain that he's wrong. He remembers that there was a cornucopia in his or on his underwear logo, and nothing's going to change his mind. And just briefly, how did he come to believe this? Easy. Someone says, do you remember this or this? And it's easy to imagine a pile of fruit with a cornucopia behind it. especially when the Mandela effect is so popular that before you even think about it, you're shown both versions. And that creates that sense of, do I really know? A little bit of doubt. It's a gaslighting operation. All right, let's move on. Donald Trump managed to get his bill taken down quite a bit, so he's not losing his tower. Not that I thought he was. I think it's all theater. It's part of his story, his fall and his resurrection. Now, we're still waiting for the head wound thing, and many think that the guy with the popping eyeball, Mohammed Sober's eye falling out, might be a reference to this upcoming Trump thing. And this is pretty extensive. When you get into this Trump head wound stuff, it ties in to many different psyops, and it appears to be predictive programming for something involving a very significant event that's meant to shock the world the way 9/11 did. So there's a reason for these huge buildups. And we often talk about the predictive programming in all these various movies that deliver consistent messaging. The Shining, many people point out it references Apollo 11, and it's Stanley Kubrick admitting that he did it. It's like, no, that's not actually what he's doing. Because in the same movie, they foreshadow 9/11 like crazy. Well, interestingly enough, The Shining, written by Stephen King, was followed by Doctor Sleep. And Doctor Sleep has a character who predicts 9/11. So the book that follows The Shining's, this whole story, the book that follows it, contains 9/11 foreshadowing. I mean, that suggests to me that Stephen King is in the know. But here's an article that was posted by Zen of Machiavelli on it. He said, Dr. Sleep, published in 2013, it's about adrenochrome, but they call it steam. And it's a sequel to The Shining from 1977. And it does, in fact, have this theme that kind of fits in with this adrenochrome story. Here's what it says. Its primary goal is to feed on humans, preferring children over adults since they were easier to scare and manipulate. According to the creature, frightened flesh tastes better, and they use fear to salt the meat. Reminds me of Sputnik. Sputnik was a movie that came out of Russia in August of 2020 about these aliens that resided within the esophagus of its host, the cosmonauts, and they would crawl out at night, scare their victims, and intentionally heighten their fear hormone because that's what they were actually feeding off of. Now here's a Wikipedia excerpt that describes the book. Abra Stone, a baby girl born in 2001, manifests psychic powers and predicts 9/11. I haven't seen the movie. I haven't read the book, but the idea of a baby predicting 9/11 is ridiculous. But the point here is simply that it continues the predictive programming from the first one without Stanley Kubrick's presence, which suggests that, yeah, Stephen King is indeed part of this. This is just getting back to this theme, though, of the Trump head wound phenomenon scenario, whatever it's going to be, and it's building up. Okay, let's move on. I thought that was worth mentioning because it kind of takes Stephen King into the realm of metascriptors. Yesterday we talked about the Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2, and how video games are examples of predictive programming. And I want to make a point about it because the people who think predictive programming is synchronicity or it's magic or it's dark occultists, all the people who mystify it focus on the movies and the TV shows with the weird tie-ins. But I think it's more important to even consider video games, which are far more immersive than movies. And you can see the messaging is far more targeted. In other words, it's always political. You know, these are messages in these video games that are geared towards steering you into the geopolitical changes in the world. That's what Modern Warfare is about. All these games are preparing you for upcoming World War III scenarios. It's to plug you into the news. It's contained within the same propaganda circle. So for the predictive programming to always align with the political agendas and what's going to come out on the news suggests that maybe it's not coming from a higher source. It's not leading people to any kind of awakenings or epiphanies. It's like, what's with all this repetition and themes in all these various movies? Well, repetition is part of propaganda. And we are being obviously hit with propaganda 24/7 to get us to accept the fake news, which is written in advance because they write our history. Our history is faked day by day. And as a group here, as a think tank, we've had a continuity of an alternate history that includes the possibility that they're lying about a lot of stuff. We may not have the full picture. We may not know what they're covering up with their lies, but we know what's not believable. And we also know why they are insisting that everyone believes in these unbelievable things. Elephant Tusk says, the strange thing about video games is they take forever to create now versus in the past, and they reuse and remake the same thing over and over. Well, look at the common denominators. You have like the Grand Theft Auto series, which is basically the Democrat Party platform. We saw it on full display in 2020. You know, Grand Theft Auto even did a day of, like, they shut off their lights. The video game company, they shut off their lights for the Black Lives Matter protesters, like in the middle of it all. Rockstar closes online games in support of BLM. GTA online players hold a virtual George Floyd memorial. There was something here. There's something where they had shut off their headquarters for a day or something. But look at the common denominators between the games. You have mostly first-person shooters, which has, I think, the agenda of, one, increasing the gun phobia on the left, and also gun fetishism, making guns these all-powerful things. You're running around with a gun, shooting 50 people. And these first-person shooters are so unbelievable in the body counts, in just the accuracy, the feats that you're required to do to win these games. It kind of stretches the imagination a bit as far as like opening it up, Overton window, kind of making it seem like the stuff we see in the news is believable. Like some skinny 110-pound kid could shoot 30 people in 4 minutes in the head. These are like video game stats. It's not real life. And then the other games are mostly about flying through space and shooting asteroids and landing on other planets. I mean, these themes are all to reinforce the dominant paradigm. Elephant Tusk says the video games keep the masses pacified, distracted, and programmed. Well, they're entertained. But what would you rather have them doing? And what are they being distracted from? That would be my question. I think it's an interesting question. It's kind of like, I don't agree with the elite, for one thing. I don't agree necessarily. But and I can understand their reasoning, I guess. The bread and circuses, what's the point of it? Well, it's, in their view, it's probably necessary for the few to maintain control over the many, but also they perceive the masses to be an unruly, fickle mob that can't restrain its emotions or its consumption or its desires, and it needs to be regulated. That's what they've always used religion for. And mass media is just the newest religion, and video games are a huge part of it. It's immersive entertainment, and the fact that they're used to advance political agendas is kind of besides the point. And that's a generalization. I mean, not all games are like that necessarily. But we look at these things in context. Like, why was it on 10/6 Modern Warfare 3 comes out? And we consistently find in all the movies, in all the video games, predictive programming that aligns to the date. I mean, look at Westworld Season 3. You have multiple references to 3/11, pandemics. You have multiple things within the logos on a number of these movies that just, it's undeniable. Anyone who says predictive programming doesn't exist is an ignoramus that don't understand media. And those who say it's mere coincidences after coincidences, again, they're kind of in the same camp. This is an intentional and calculated method of implanting messages into the collective psyche consistently, and it's a nonstop barrage, and they've never stopped doing it, and they won't ever stop. We're just noticing it. But the problem is the truthers mystify it, whereas the normies deny it exists. It's like, no, it exists. Whether you like it or not, whether you understand it or not, it certainly does exist. All right, moving on. Now, I keep up with predictive programming by watching a lot of the movies and checking out the various games that are being played. And I just watched Roadhouse with Donnie Darko, or Jake Gyllenhaal, who plays Donnie Darko. And most of you know Donnie Darko is a movie that contains predictive programming for Donald Trump and 2020, which we won't get into all of that right now. It also had 9/11 predictive programming. Even in the advertisements, they had to change stuff because falling planes were a part of it. The director of Donnie Darko, by the way, his father worked for NASA on the Viking Mars missions. But what I saw in Roadhouse, like Donnie Darko, Jake Gyllenhaal has a life-changing moment when he confronts somebody named Frank. In Donnie Darko, it's a rabbit, Frank. In this movie, it's Frankie, a woman. But I was just looking to see if there's any kind of connections between that and this theme that we've been pointing out of actors carrying the same symbolism, the same roles, the same archetypes from movie to movie. Interestingly, his character is compared to some guy named Waco Wade, some character in a Western. And they emphasize the word Western a couple of times. And the Western is a book called Death at Double Cross. So Double Cross, the XX resurrection symbol, and of course Waco Wade. There's some strangeness there, but another thing, Jake Gyllenhaal was recently discussing how he was being considered, and perhaps is still being considered, for the role of Batman. And Batman, in much of the symbolism, is also attached to Donald Trump. Then you have the Donald Trump head wound thing is kind of inferred in Donnie Darko, where Frankie the bunny takes off his mask and one of his eyes has got this grotesque wound. And interestingly, it looks exactly like this scene at the end of the movie where Jake Gyllenhaal's character emerges from a fight with one of his eyes bruised shut and the other one open, and it looks like this one eye symbolism, which again would reiterate this idea that Jake Gyllenhaal's his roles are part of this predictive programming narrative for Donald Trump and his world stage role upcoming as Antichrist with some kind of grotesque head wound that a lot of us have been looking forward to for a few years now. Now, the majority of the people on X who are talking about this particular theme, this next plot twist, are assuming it's going to be real. Just a heads up. And my assumption is that it's not. Okay, back to current news. P. Diddy's Los Angeles home raided by the government, and his sons King and Justin are in cuffs. You know, with everything I say fake until proven real, but I'm not saying everything is fake. The way that everyone else says everything is real, unless you can prove it's fake. I say everything's fake until proven real, but specifically when it comes to extraordinary claims, not attended by evidence. Things that require a leap of faith, or in other words, it has to be extraordinary. Normal things, maybe not, although they still may have some propaganda utility. But in this case, do I have any reason to doubt that P. Diddy is some kind of human trafficker and that this is some kind of a real situation? Not necessarily. You know, not if you look back at a lot of the rumors, the creepy stuff that being kind of said by various people. There are many insinuations there. So to me, this is not extraordinary. I'm not exactly suggesting this is all fake and theater. We shall see. But I'm not going to automatically say it's real. In other words, I don't know yet. I don't have enough information. I'm suspending judgment. That's what skepticism is. If you say you know, on what basis? Illusion warfare. Les Luthor pointed this out again, that the movie Tenet has a lot of tie-ins to what just happened at the event. But he likes to point out that there's a lot of, quote, chicken feed, what he calls it. Chicken feed to keep the truther community involved and thinking that they're somehow part of the mystery van and they're trying to solve the crime. Like, oh no, the media is lying, but we can figure it out. Look at this. And so you have this people's media. And this is why Elon Musk said the other day, X is where media hoaxes go to die. Because the X is now acting as the alternative or the people's media that don't believe the mainstream and they figure out the truth. And they're waking people up. But anyway, what he said here, he says the photographer is filming the whole thing, leaving chicken feed for the useful idiot community pecking. The useful idiot open source intel community. And open source intel, this is what QAnon was. The Nonner movement was really just a lot of people given a lot of chicken feed to pour over, to share. And it's been poured over, it's all been sorted through, and now it's being recycled. They clip off the dates so they can recycle a lot of these old memes and posts. It's pretty bad. Like, they're really at the bottom of the chicken feed barrel at the point where they're waiting for Barron Trump to grow up so they can worship him next. TMZ finally reported on the California man arrested after he was spotted eating a severed human leg. Didn't even cook it. It was not his fault. The train chopped off the leg. It wasn't him. Jair Bolsonaro, he's like the Brazilian Trump. He's facing investigation into his various criminal activities. These world stage characters become very obvious after a while. And you can see how they all serve the same roles. Nicotrama says Les Luthor is a god. Yeah, Les Luthor is legendary. His takes on events since Ukraine have been very useful, informative, and he's relentless. And more, he's coined the term illusion warfare. Because, like us, he's recognized that PSYOP is overused, the media hijacked it. Hoax is not an appropriate term. It suggests that somebody's tricking the media when they are, in fact, the hoaxers. And it's much more than just disparate events that bypass our filters. No, these are not hoaxes. Okay, let's see what else we have going through this Twitter feed. The Titanic door that Jack tragically couldn't fit has been auctioned for $718,000. I find these Titanic references interesting for a lot of reasons. We talked about the Titanic quite a lot last year. There's some fascinating connections with James Cameron, the Titanic, Avatar, and the theme of the sinking of the West. The West being represented as the Titanic, as it's a metaphor for hubris, too big to fail, but how this has been connected to the Twin Towers. The Twin Towers sinking has been correlated with the Titanic sinking through the work of James Cameron. And what's more, this has been further connected to this theme of climate chaos, and it's been expanded. In fact, I would say that James Cameron's Avatar movies were a way of reinvigorating the environmentalist movement and recreating the blue marble effect. If you didn't see Avatar 2 Way of Water, I described it as the new blue marble. And blue marble was when NASA goes out to space, 1972, they show us the world, and it creates the environmentalist movement because now they can see Gaia suspended in the abyss, being preyed upon by humans, in need of being saved from man. And so it changed our world. That was a worldview upgrade or update. Fake or not, it changed how we see the world. And so the Avatar 2 was more or less exactly the same thing. It shows you how the world is conscious. And that's where Gaia comes from, the idea that the world is a singular entity and it's aware and you can tap into it. And so the movie was about Gaia consciousness and about how the West is a threat to the Earth and it may actually kill Gaia. And then after this, so this is kind of interesting because the Way of Water is about this like Atlantis type group of Na'vi, the blue people, and they're fighting against the Marines, like these cops, basically these enforcers of the West and Western imperialism and capitalism, coming to their Pandora paradise to plunder, killing the indigenous people, and they're not connected to nature. And so this story of the Na'vi throwing off these soldiers with sticks and rocks was repeated in Atlanta at the Cop City protests, where the cops want to take 80 acres of forest and turn it into a training ground. The environmentalists fight them off with sticks and rocks. Just like the movie, you had this same dynamic. Anyway, we dissected this at length because they were merging BLM with environmentalists. In fact, there was a martyr, the individual who was killed by the police there, according to the autopsies, was shot through the palms of his hands. I mean, that's how you create a martyr. You crucify him. You make it look like he was crucified. But my point is that Cop City, PSYOP, and the protests that followed it were perfectly tied in with not only Avatar 2, Way of Water, Atlanta, Atlantis, all these connections, but also with the WEF, talking about floods at the time. And my contention is that James Cameron would have been the director. Major League Metascriptor. And by the way, one of the things, just as a kind of, if you don't remember this, so it was Cameron who did Titanic, and this is why I mention him. He filmed Titanic, 1997. The movie comes out, and the Titanic breaks in two, and like the Twin Towers, it sinks, even has jumpers. Well, later, we see this movie called Don't Look Up, which has Leonardo DiCaprio, and he's warning the scientists, or trying to tell the greedy capitalists, hey, we got to stop what we're doing, we got to deflect the comet before it kills us. And these guys are like, no, we want to mine the thing for money. So Leonardo DiCaprio is warning everybody about this incoming space iceberg that's going to sink the Earth. And of course, the Earth loses. But they chose him because of his correlation to his role in the Titanic and the sinking of the Titanic. So Don't Look Up and the Titanic are linked by Leonardo DiCaprio, chosen for this very reason, though, because they're trying to correlate the idea of the sinking of the Titanic with the sinking of the West, with the sinking of Gaia itself, the destruction of the world. One more thing. On 9/11, 2001, the director of the Titanic was actually at the wreckage of the Titanic. James Cameron was at the scene of the Titanic on 9/11, filming a documentary called Ghosts in the Abyss, which has an interesting connection if you think about the term abyss. Ghosts in the Abyss, he's down there filming the Titanic. Titanic's correlated with the Twin Towers, and Revelation 9/11 talks about the abyss, the beast or the destroyer in the abyss, which has a lot more connections we can get into. The destroyer in the abyss seems to be related to what Cameron presented in Terminator 2, which is the nuke. And of course, Terminator, Apollyon, Abaddon, these are all alternate names or terms for Revelation 9/11's thing in the abyss, whatever it's going to be. That I think it's whatever is going to bring down the West, and I think it symbolizes the nuke. And then fascinatingly, this whole Revelation 9/11 has been connected to Donald Trump. Another kind of tangent, but I'm just mentioning DiCaprio, Titanic in the news. I tend to notice these things because they are important pieces, in this bigger script. This is where it's at. It says, so many people getting locked up on the new Diddy law. Skyfish, Tim, I just barely saw all this ISIS-Russia event, fake until proven real, very hoaxy. Oh, yes. There a few key points about it. There was a drill before. There was a warning by the State Department 2 weeks before, very specific. There was a lot of build-up, in other words. Then you have the usual stuff. Was it ISIS? Was it an inside job? Did Putin cause it? So you have this hallmarks of it being, basically a hoax. Aside from what you see itself, if you find any of it convincing, then you're easily convinced. There's really nothing there. But like every other event, we've taken it apart and it just seems to have all the boxes checked. And someone went and they checked the Yelp's reviews and they found no one's parked there. No one's put any reviews there in a couple of years, like 5 years. I tend to think it was a closed movie set. And then the other aspect of it, it's on 322. And there's more when you get into the predictive programming and symbolism and stuff. There's more stuff connecting this Crocus concert hall to, well, I'll see if I can find some of it. Foreshadowing. I mean, this is like a 9/11 level event for them. Brother Berg posted this. The infamous Call of Duty level No Russian, where the player goes as an undercover, oh, he's an undercover CIA asset. So Call of Duty, you play an undercover CIA asset, and you're taking part in a massacre at an airport in Moscow. So again, this is another thing that draws heavy parallels to the Crocus City Hall attacks. Let's see, this is where it's at. It says, I can't spell tonight. Gyllenhaal played Mysterio in a Spider-Man movie. Mysterio was an illusionist who deceived the world. Fascinating. Yeah, so here's what I'm bringing, what I mentioned, this Donnie Darko and Jake Gyllenhaal. It's simply this. We're looking at the body of predictive programming as repetition in media to prepare us for singular events to be presented down the line. And Donald Trump has been well represented in predictive programming going back 60 years. He's been foreshadowed before he even grew up, like Musk and like many others we can point to. These are world stage personages. And many of the ways, or one of the ways that they are able to build this composite is they have many different actors who may carry certain aspects of that person and their future role in a movie. For example, Full Metal Jacket, the character Joker is templated off of JFK. And there's a lot we can go into there. But, you know, the guy with the target on the side of his head, Joker, JFK, war photographer. JFK was a war photographer. Fascinating connections with the William Randolph Hearst, with the Hearst family. But my point of it is, the actor Matthew Modine, therefore, Joker, has this connection to JFK, and so we're looking at these actors and other roles they have played moving into the future, and do they have similar connotations? So in this specific case, Donnie Darko, Donald Trump connections. Donnie Darko, if he does the Batman role, would be another strong connection. But in this movie too, the one eye symbolism, where he ends the movie with one of his eyes beaten closed and the other one is wide open. And of course, his character is connected to somebody named Waco Wade. In Waco, where Trump kicked off his campaign, he said last battle, Armageddon, Waco. Waco, where you had this guy, 33-year-old, incinerated by the ATF, believed he was Jesus Christ, and so did his followers. Waco Wade, in a book called Death at Double Cross. That's the character that was being compared to Donnie Dark, or to Jake Gyllenhaal's character in Roadhouse. Well, Death at Double Cross, obviously, Double Cross has a great deal of symbolism. We're talking about, you know, the X is a cross. XX is a double cross, symbol of resurrection. You know, back on 4/4 last year, because we're approaching it again. 4/4 last year was when Donald Trump was arraigned, when he was arrested. And, you know, he sold the jacket he was wearing. They chopped it into pieces and auctioned it, kind of like was done with Jesus's garments. And Trump has compared himself to Jesus multiple times, even today. But last year on 4/4, Heath Ledger, the Joker, would have turned 44. But that was the day he was arraigned. It was the 55th anniversary of Martin Luther King's assassination. And coincidentally, outside that courthouse, Joker 2 was being filmed. Again, Joker 2, Double Cross, Resurrection, Heath Ledger turning 44 on 4/4. 4 is another cross. X is a cross. The 4 is a cross. The T is a cross. You can see the ways that various symbols can be represented in kind of covert ways, but when you see their repeatedly used code, it becomes easy to discern it. I'm going through your comments here. All right, let's move on. This is where it's asked as Jake Paul versus Tyson. There has to be some symbolism there. Elephant Tusk says, I think the X symbolism has everything to do with Planet X visibility. Okay, now let's talk about the X symbolism because we're getting close to 4-8 and America gets X'd. That was foreshadowed in Leave the World Behind. And Leave the World Behind is a perfect example of how predictive programming is all political. It's all geared towards the world stage. It's not mystical. It's not done by anything more than Democrats and Republicans. It's done to maintain the info war. It's done to maintain the mind war and the dialectics to keep people on these sides. But that movie has the big X, and so the advent of X, Elon Musk's X, is also very significant here because the X is a cross, and Musk is on the world stage. I call him Pope Elon because he's basically reprising the role of Constantine in several ways. Specifically, though, Constantine had a vision of a glowing cross, and he said, under the sign, I'll unite the empire. And Musk similarly put the X on Twitter headquarters and it was glowing. And this was last year during the dog days of summer. He said, blaze your glory. The dog star is called the blazing star. We have this blazing cross. And I thought, this is like prophecy coming true because in 2017 I put out an article called Elon Musk, the Martian Pope, explaining how he was characterized, or he was portraying sort of this new Constantine, whose role it is to, consolidate a new Bible, put us into our fiefdoms, feudalism. Well, space communism is feudalism. There's no other way to describe it. It's a closed system. You can't leave. You don't have any private property. Space communism, lunar bases, Mars bases. And this has been the blueprint since the early Russian rocket pioneers who openly endorsed a communist base on Mars to show us how it's done. And then you do it here on Earth. So that's always been the goal. One of these early space pioneers, his name was Constantine, interestingly. But when Musk put the X on the building, he said X would be the everything app. And I take this to mean the consolidation of everything so they can censor, so they can filter, so they can get rid of non-canonical texts, get rid of the Apocrypha, get rid of heresy, get rid of anything that doesn't comport with the state-sanctioned worldview. And that state-sanctioned worldview should lead people into the new system of feudalism. It should basically say, hey, we have to get rid of everything that says space is fake. They're not going to ship us off to the Mars bases, and Musk wants to put a million people on Mars. So Mars needs to be populated so they can't have non-believers represented on the world stage media. So of course they got to censor that. I often describe the mass media as the world state's de facto church, and the screen, that little black monolith in your pocket, is the Bible. But it's not yet consolidated and it's not yet purified. They're still in the process of censoring it up. Elephant Tusk says, supposedly the X eclipse will make Planet X visible to the masses. And he says, all these contrails block a lot of visibility. Well, the X's in the sky that you see from condensation trails are based on flight paths. Kind of like how you have intersections on the road. It's not any more complicated than that. But you are right about this, the repeated X stuff. And there's just a few examples here. We just barely got into it. But there is something going on the 8th that's really emphasizing this. But is it going to lead to something? I don't know. I'm not inclined to believe that anybody here is able to predict the future and that any of these prophets online are accurate. I think there's a methodology to making it look like they're able to predict the future. And I'm looking forward to 4-8 simply to call them out. I'm going to take a list of, let's say, 10 of the most popular Twitter prophets who say that Armageddon begins on 4-8. And if they're all wrong, I'm going to call them out one by one and just ask them to explain their methodology, because I believe that we do see patterns. We do have plenty of suggestions of highly controlled media, but people go overboard when they take out the gematria calculators. When they start putting arbitrary values in until they make it fit. And then they build their case based on all these hits that they found. And they draw a target around it. Like, look, I hit bullseyes. It's like, well, no, actually, you made it appear like you did. But those types of things aren't necessary to make the case that we're making, but rather they distract from it. Because we're merely pointing out the use of propaganda and mind control by man to control man. The internet prophets using gematria calculators claiming that the world's about to end are actually suggesting that these coincidences are far too voluminous to have been conceived of by man. They're too random. It's too hard to believe that it's nothing. It could be less than a higher power doing it. And that's not the right answer, but they're obfuscating the truth. Or I'm wrong, and on the 8th of April, the sun's going to blot out forever. Internet's going to be cut off. Aliens are going to descend. Antichrist emerges, or whatever they say is going to happen. Earthquakes. We're all going to get sucked up into the sky. What is supposed to happen? And a literalist says true earthers are going to boil vinegar during the eclipse in April to clean away the chemtrails. Armin Ree says, do you think the eclipse will follow that path, or is it a ruse? Will people be able to verify it? This is going to be probably the most viewed eclipse of all time. There's going to be people viewing it all along the line of totality. That's why they're shutting down schools. They have the National Guard out. Elephant Tusk says it's very clear they want a second pandemic, and to that I'm going to say no. They will not do it because it wouldn't work. They're preparing us for Fallout. I mean, haven't you watched Amazon? Fallout's about to come out. If you want to know what's going to happen in the future, you got to watch Netflix or Amazon. Netflix, of course, co-founder, first CEO, related to Edward Bernays, Sigmund Freud. So no, they're not going to do that again. They use that to train you so you know how to be a good locked down citizen. But no, it's going to be Fallout. And Fallout won't be so easy to politicize. You know, the other thing, it was like if you're on the left, you obey. If you're on the right, you're going to resist. But no one's going to resist Fallout. They're going to say, okay, I'm staying inside. This is where it's at. Says the only thing that will happen on the 8th is nothing. The 9th will come. And some folks about to eat double nothing burgers. Emerald Bear says, the end of the world is the start of another world, not the literal end, just the end of a world era. Correct. Exactly. I want to say congratulations to everyone here because you survived the end of the world. It ended on 12/21/2020. Winter solstice, Christmas star, Saturn-Jupiter conjunction, the likes of which we haven't seen since Jesus was born. So we had a reset. That was our year zero. We actually started over. The world ended, and we are in the new age. That's why we have all the talk of the Great Reset and the Great Awakening. You notice that the left wants a Great Reset, the right wants the Great Awakening. They're both asking for the same thing. They both promise the same thing. It's the same type of idealism, or utopianism rather. Although the left is like, we want this future transhumanist scientism-based utopia. And the right is like, no, we want traditional values, good old days, traditionalism, idealized past utopia. FMGR says, I tuned in to the Truth Mafia podcast the other day. Had to give them a thumbs down when one of the hosts suggested that chemtrails are there to block communications with your spirit guides. Right. See, this is a problem. I call it a philosophical crisis. It's a problem. The problem is simply that we are looking at influencers and big channels who are still falling for basic logical fallacies that are, I think, planted there to make you look uncredible. They always say, the truthers are always like, you guys calling stuff fake are making us, you're causing us to lose credibility with the mainstream. It's like, I don't want credibility with the mainstream. They don't have credibility with me. But the fear-based chemtrail story, it's at this point, it's a little old. And if you're still kind of carrying that around, I'm going to have to ask you, why aren't you doing something about it? Or do chemtrails make you apathetic? Maybe that's what they do. Because if somebody was dumping their litter boxes in my backyard, I would call the cops. I would knock on their door. That's a little more concrete. Now, if somebody was spraying poisons in my yard, yeah, I would do the same thing. Just because it's a plane a few thousand feet above your head doesn't mean you shouldn't take action. So at what point do you take action? Has your responsibility been diffused? Are there not at least 10 or 15 chemtrail truthers who can do a lawsuit? I would lead this lawsuit if I had 19 chemtrail believers. I'm a non-believer, but I would do it for you. If I can get 19 of you to show any kind of initiative or agency, does it turn you into NPCs? Yeah, call cops on chemtrails. I got somebody to do it once. I did have someone, he was in Canada, and I was like, I don't want to hear about it unless you're going to call the cops. He called the Mounties. I don't know if they swatted him. Never heard from him since, but yeah, I managed to get somebody to do it. Elephant Tusk says, New Age is serious disinfo psyop. No, New Age is a Masonic thing. Before there was a New Age movement. And the New Age is intrinsic to our present age, scientism. I mentioned the Russian rocket pioneers. They were believers in what they would call cosmism. And Russian cosmism was kind of like theosophy and panpsychism, the idea of this intelligent universe and mankind becoming a multiplanetary species. I actually wanted to spend some time talking about the early days of the space program in Russia because it mirrors Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard, science fictionizing Mystery Babylon. Well, the Russian rocket pioneers were tapping into something very similar. In fact, it has its roots even in theosophy. So from the very beginning, the space program has been a religious paradigm. From the beginning, it has been attached to this New Ageism, which is ultimately tied into the precession of the equinoxes and the age of Aquarius. And we're in the age of Aquarius, the information age. The water being flooded symbolizes, or the water being poured out by Aquarius, it represents information. It represents wisdom. That's why I call this a sea of irrelevance, because we do have the information age upon us, but we're also being flooded with dis, mis, and malinformation as well, which is all there intentionally to drown it out. But there's more, because I have been saying, and I wrote a book on this called Secret Religion of the Elite, that they have science fictionized Mystery Babylon. Well, listen to this. Russian cosmism, alien visitations and cosmic energies in contemporary Russia. In this article, it talks about how the Russian cosmism movement was about creating a scientific equivalent for these archaic concepts. So, for example, I've mentioned that aliens are the scientific equivalent of angels. Here's an excerpt from an article about it. Although Russian cosmism is an all-encompassing movement combining elements of theosophy, philosophy, and evolution, astrology, even science fiction, this article focuses on its cosmic topics. But again, science fiction is a part of it. Look at Elon Musk, who literally stepped out of the pages of Mars, a technical tale by Werner von Braun. But again, it goes on here. A special feature of cosmism was the attempt to discover scientific equivalents to investigations previously characterized as esoteric or occult. Jack Parsons, occultist. He hangs out with L. Ron Hubbard, science fiction writer. And what do? They provide a scientific cover for what is the esoteric, the occult. I've been saying, and this is what first clued me in, I started to recognize that these rocket launches are actually totally related to these fertility rites, that is in fact an obelisk. Scientific equivalents to esoteric, rockets to space, obelisk resurrection symbol, digital transcendence, using science to mask mystery Babylon. Here's an article, The Spiritual Geography of Russian Cosmism. And one of the leading minds in this thing is a guy named Constantine, who has been quoted by Elon Musk when he talks about becoming multiplanetary. So there's another Constantine associated with Musk. Main themes in cosmist thought include the active human role in cosmic evolution, creation of new life forms, a new level of humanity, unlimited extension of human longevity to a state of immortality, physical resurrection of the dead. Now, there's a series of books by Elon Musk's first wife, Justine Musk, that have a lot to do with these ideas of, I guess, clones, but also of physical immortality by having one's body transported into these new clones. Fascinating stuff. Here's a tweet where Elon Musk said, "Blimps rock," and I superimpose over it Starship. My contention is that Starship is a blimp, that it's a rigid airship. Now, this is also very interesting. I mentioned Constantine. Well, Constantine studied the mechanics of lighter-than-air powered flying machines, and he first proposed all-metal dirigibles, and he built models. So these rigid metal airships, and you can find these on Wikipedia, you can find some pictures. Here's Constantine with his steel dirigibles. This is in 1913. So what are these? These are like metal cylindrical blimps that can be steered. He called them controllable metallic balloons. Gave a scientific and technical rationale for the design of an airship with a metal sheath. But what was interesting about this is that he did not receive any kind of funding for it. No monetary support, no recognition, no moral support. So I'm like, wait, did these just get scrapped? He went to an aeronautics congress in St. Petersburg, and he got a lukewarm response. These were discontinued. So I'm like, wait a minute here. Did they discontinue these, or did these become the basis for faking rockets going to space? And that's what I would say. That this is how they fake rockets. They're using steel dirigibles. And that's what Starship is. It's not what they say it is. They blow them up just to trick you, to make you think it's something that it's not. Sort of like how Loon X became Starlink satellites. You know, Sataloons. Yeah, Sataloons to deliver internet, very effective. Yet, for some reason, they didn't make any money. But then, all of a sudden, Starlink shows up. I think there's a connection here. Space communism, a new workers' paradise, sold to the capitalists. Pretty ingenious if you think about it. But yeah, he believed that colonizing space would lead to the perfection of the human species, giving them immortality and a carefree existence. Quite a sales pitch for slavery for a gulag on Mars, where you're expected to donate your own blood to mix with the soil to build bricks. All right, let me go through your comments. This is where it's at. It says, I like post-apocalypse movies. It'd be cool to live in a world where I'm not governed. Yeah, I've noticed that there's a lot of movies that glorify the post-apocalyptic existence that it seems like it'd be a little bit of fun, but I think when you get down to it, I mean, if you've been camping for a few days, you know that things fall apart pretty quickly. All right, want to say thanks everyone for joining. We'll start earlier tomorrow. I have to run, but the 24/7 live stream is being continually updated. I'm adding some of the new tracks, some of these ones that we played tonight, and I'll be adding more and more material from this website, which is, again, it's suno.ai, and we use this to create music. I have a few examples I posted on my website. I'll post a link in Gilded as well. We'll follow up on the story of P. Diddy if anybody's interested in it. Uh, I'm not sure again. Fake until proven real. If it's an extraordinary claim, I don't find any of it all that surprising or unbelievable. Yeah, this is where it's at. Says country music on my YouTube feed. Yeah, I know. I did do a country music song. I should just play that song really quick for anyone who missed it, or I'll put a link in the chat. It's actually good, and I don't even like country. And I'm pretty sure this is better than, Beyonce's country. This is Tears on the Big Screen. I'm going to turn this back on over to 24/7.